And it's important that we talk about hola, hola, hola. Is it looking neat? Entanglement. Entanglement. Kama mfanya entanglement ni shimwa ibuki shori omukashiwa kwa Smith Will. Hello and welcome to Zambia. What a day. Thank you so much for joining me here. I am very delighted that you are joining me. And my name is Dingindaba Jonah Buyoya. And what we do is take a look at some of the biggest news stories in the country, what is making news in Zambia. There's a lot of stories that we have to talk about. There's a lot of stories that are making news. And the day has been unfolding in some of the most interesting ways. And I knew that it was going to unfold the way that it has. So, what are we going to be talking about? Well, 10 years on, Michael Sata is no more. So much has happened in the last 10 years, but we find a very interesting way of remembering his life. And then we also are going to talk about so there's two sides to Michael Sata. The Archdiocese, the Catholic Church basically has issued a statement just this evening. They've written an open letter of complaint to the government, and I'll be delving into that. We also are just going to take you a little bit back to the night when Michael Sata's death was announced. I have a very special guest who I'm going to be talking to about this, which I find very interesting. And then Paramount Chief Mpezeni has just gone, is blasted the green economy minister and effectively talking to the broader government about talk, and how talk is cheap. Let's get straight into it, in fact. Former President Michael Sata died today on the 28th of October, 10 years ago. And one of the things that will forever be imprinted in the history of this country is how he died 4 days before 4 days after Zambia turned 50. This was a very significant moment. And if you remember, it was a very significant moment because the Golden Jubilee was a big deal. It was a big deal for Zambia. And so we expected that he was going to be a part of it, but he wasn't going to be a part of it because he had gone to London. And I think at that point, there was no need for government to keep on saying that he was just fine, because that was the stance. That was the stance that they were holding, saying that the government is, the president is fine. But you remember just a few weeks before that, we saw President Michael Sata at Parliament, and he was visibly unwell, and a lot of people had this concern. But I want us to go back to the night of his death. I was actually quite young when that happened. I was 17 years old, and and yet I remember a lot of the things that happened. But I have someone else who I think should probably remember these things a lot better than I would. And I'm just going to try and call him now because he's the person actually who broke the story. He broke the story of former President Michael Sata's death. And I just want to get him to weigh in on this and just run us through that night and some of the things that happened. And I'm hoping that he picks up this call. I'm trying to call him right now. And I'm calling him on a production crew number, so I'm hoping he's gonna pick up. Let me see. Okay, he's picked up, and we've got him. CVO Jonah here. You are on Zambia. What a day! Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Jonah. How are you?
I'm okay. So I'm just telling the people on the podcast that I'm talking to a very special guest, and they didn't know who, but it's Costa Mwansa, my boss, and right now my guest on What a Day. So we're talking about the 10 years of Michael Sata's death, his memorial, and so many things that have happened over the last few days because of this memorial. But I also am aware that you've got a lot to share with the 28th of October in 2014, because you broke this story. Can you just run me through what happened that night? What happened that night?
Yeah, so very early in the morning, at about just minutes or so after midnight, I received a phone call from a very senior government official then, who was serving as minister in the cabinet of then President Michael Sata. And obviously the last that we had fully seen President Michael Sata in public was when President Michael Sata addressed Parliament, I think during the opening of a session. And there were concerns, obviously, of how frail and how well the president did not look at that time. And he had obviously gone to London for checkups. So very early in the morning, after midnight, on
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to ask you to start again because my audio had a bit of a problem with me recording your audio. So I'm just gonna have to put the phone on my mic, and then you can go ahead and we start from the top. We'll start from the top because we had a bit of a challenge with the audio. So I'm just gonna ask you this question again. What happened that night? Then you can pick it up from the top.
So as I was explaining, yes, I said 10 years ago on this day, I received a phone call that woke me up from bed just minutes after midnight from a very senior government official then who was serving in President Sata's cabinet then, informing me that something had happened in London, though he was not very precise with the facts of the matter that President had passed on. But obviously speaking to me as a journalist, he was trying to give me a lead as to what was going on in London, and obviously that we would try and get our boots onto the ground to break the story. And I was explaining earlier that for those that remember, President Sata had last been seen in public addressing an opening of Parliament, and there was public concern as to why the president then had been allowed to address Parliament when he was looking quite frail and was not well. And obviously that led to him having a routine checkup in London. And obviously 10 years ago, as it was known, President Sata did not return from London. He passed away there. So I was given that lead or tip from a very, very senior cabinet minister then. And I decided to quickly drive to the movie TV studios then on Nangwenya Road. And I picked up a colleague who I met there, who was my news editor at that time, of the period. And we obviously started piecing up what the implications of breaking that story would have meant. This is almost now around 1 o'clock. And obviously government systems are trying to put in place a mechanism of how the citizenry and the country would wake up to this information. And so we then decided, before we could break the story, to call in then the acting president, who was also Justice Minister and Secretary General of the Patriotic Front then, Mr. Edgar Chagwalungu. And I called Edgar Lungu then, just asking him to say, look, we've heard this is what has happened, but I quickly went on to say, this is what has happened, then we extend our condolences. So he basically said, if you're seeing a Mwalanda Costa, and he broke into cry. And so that is how we had confirmed, really, that the president had died then. It was a bit of a tricky situation. I mean, there was no official government confirmation at that time in terms of a written statement. But we decided to put a scroll on the screen that should have been past 1 now, that the president had died, and more details would be coming through after cabinet convened an emergency meeting, because that is what then the acting president, while President Sata was in the UK, President Lungu said, so we'll be meeting as cabinet in the morning to basically inform the nation and decide, the way forward. And I remember at that given time receiving a phone call from then State House Press Secretary and a good colleague, George Chela, was quite furious as to how we could have issued such a statement before government and State House officially released that information. At that point, I remember international news media outlets, Reuters, the BBC, and everybody started calling in to really find out the validity and the source of our information. And I think as everybody continued to verify through sources, they started quoting this little piece of a story that we had run. So it was quite a long night. I was in shorts at that particular point because I'd just been woken up to that news, rushed to the studio. There was fear, obviously, of what would happen if we had released such a big story and then we found out that it was not true. So I remember being in the studio up until around 5. There were so many attempts by other people trying to tell us to remove the story up until government officially announces. 2 senior colleagues, one of them, Anthony Nkwita, Emmanuel Mwamba, personally drove to the studio around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning asking us to make a stand down until government officially, released that story. But yes, John, I can remember that 10 years ago on this day, I was one of those that received that tip and was the first to break the news of the demise of late President Sata.
All right. I hope we can do a video interview to this effect, but I just wanted to get that very interesting story that you just shared. So thank you. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, great. Now I know, I know that there's a lot of people I've been seeing. There's a lot of people that are saying they were not able to hear him clearly. I did everything I possibly could for me to be able to hear him clearly, but he was just narrating what happened on that night. Basically, he was sharing his experience on how he got to break the news that the former president has died. It sounds like a very eventful night, honestly. It sounds like a very, very eventful night. But all of this, 10 years later, has come back. And the discussion 10 years later is basically to talk about the politics that surrounds an event like this one. And I want to start, first of all, by adding context to what government's interest in such an activity is. So, for a former head of state, Cabinet has got the interest on the first time that the funeral is being held, and they have an interest every 5 years. So this is 10 years after Michael Sata died. So it then is, in fact, a state event. And that's why it became important for government to participate. But I think that there's also a lot of political tension because after that election, in 2021, there's still remnants of conflict here and there between the Patriotic Front and the United Party for National Development, who are in government at the moment, and took out the Patriotic Front. So it resulted in what is appearing to be conflict between the Catholic Church and the government. And the reason why this is the impression is because of this letter. I'm going to read out this open letter that the Archdiocese of Lusaka has written. It's a letter it's a letter of protest over systemic abuse of instruments of state violence by government, the cordoning of the Cathedral of the Child Jesus. And I'm going to read out what the letter says. It is with utter shock and dismay that we write this open letter of protest over the state's conduct of unilaterally and forcefully cordoning off the Cathedral of the Child Jesus on the 28th of October 2024 at the occasion of honoring the legacy of the 5th Republican President of Zambia, His Excellency Michael Chilufya Sata, rest in peace. We wish to bring to your attention this serious mischief on the part of government aimed at intimidation by way of abuse of the instruments of state violence. This act is an infringement on the fundamental right of worship. When we arrived on the said morning, we were greeted to a scene of heavily armed police officers with anti-riot gear who had sealed both entrances to the Cathedral of the Child Jesus in Archdiocese of Lusaka. Devotees who turned up for morning prayers were turned away and we're also fearful of the military scene. Your Excellency, the cathedral is a place of worship, and what happened today is totally unacceptable for a country that professes to be a Christian nation. We feel that this brazen act of intimidation should be cast to good conscience and brought to light. We feel that the tendency by this government to make an affront on the church has become endemic and systemic and must therefore be stopped forthwith. We recognize that members of the church had sought permission in the months back to host the 10th memorial anniversary Requiem Mass for the 5th President, His Excellency Michael Sata, on the 28th of October 2024. We also note that a similar church service was being held by government at the Anglican Cathedral of the Holy Cross for the same purpose. However, this was no reason to prevent another remembrance service to be held at any other place of worship. Despite various personal interventions by Archbishop Reverend Dr. Alec Banda, the Metropolitan Archbishop of Lusaka, and lawyer Mr. John Sangwa State Council, the premises remained sealed until after 9:30 hours. Your Excellency, we wish to express our concerns with the heavy-handed approach which we witnessed today and utter disrespect shown to a sacred premises. We feel that there is a systemic and coordinated violation of human rights by the police, who have been turned into a wing, an extension of the UPND party. The harassment and arbitrary arrest of citizens and prolonged detention of citizens who provide checks and balances to the government has become the norm of the day rather than an exception. In a word, therefore, we are convinced that this government has become rogue. Today's events at the Cathedral of the Child Jesus are not an isolated incident, but rather a coordinated scheme to intimidate the citizenry. We end our open letter with the proverbial adage attributed to Lord Acton, the 19th century English historian, who states that power tends to corrupt, absolute power corrupts absolutely. The one who has ears, let them listen. That is the end of the statement. A very strong statement, if you ask me, by the Archdiocese of Lusaka. And it's very difficult to understand what the logic is of what happened today. Very, very difficult, because I would really like to understand the reasoning behind it, because, a funeral is a remembrance ceremony, is rather supposed to be very respectable and free of this kind of drama. So what happened today is really strange. It's really, really strange, because there's very little justification to what happened, and it's more about a show of muscle by the law enforcement agencies and the government today. And I'm still very, very shocked with what happened and how things transpired with Michael Sata's memorial. But I guess I think William, you've got something to say, so you can go ahead and make your contribution, and then I'll come back.
Good evening. Are you able to get me, Jonah?
Yes, I am. I'm able to hear. Yes, I am. I'm able to hear you. Thanks.
You can get me? Okay. I think the events of today were unfortunate and were extremely avoidable, because there have been some audio recordings that have gone. I think the one that has really been prominent is that of the former First Lady. She's on record saying that the to the stage, reminding them of the 10th memorial service president, and to which government acknowledged that they'll go on and organize a memorial service for the late president. And in part of the organization, as been the norms for memorial services, the government opted to use the Cathedral of the Holy Cross. And once government proposed to use that, we saw that some patriotic front, particularly the Edgar Lungu led group, through their spokesperson, the Emmanuel Mambas and the like, they proposed that since President Sata was a staunch Catholic, why should they not consider venues like St. Ignatius which was his home church parish, or the Pope Square, which is the cathedral of. But government maintained its stance that they've always used the cathedral for all such events. And when such decisions was made, government that they'll go on. And the Edgar Lungu, or rather through Vice President, if that is the position of government, they too were going to hold their own separate memorial service at the Pope Square or the Cathedral of the Church of they went further to try and coerce also the Sata family to attend the memorial service that was going to be held, or the one that was held at the Pope's Child Jesus. But the former First Lady said, we are the families, we are the ones who requested for government to, and as a family, we are going to attend the memorial service by the state, because this is a state function, and that is how memorial services. But what the First Lady said, which was really interesting, she said that in much as the Patriotic Front group wanted to have, she proposed that they had told them to say, fine, let us have this official one by government today, which is the 28th. Then on the 2nd of November, have a requiem mass to honor the former. But the Edgar Lungu led PF memorial service, which of course, unfortunately, they found the police, as we saw now the events, but were really something that was avoided. And for me, this is where the fraction, because we've seen the Catholic Church, particularly the Lusaka diocese led by the Archbishop Banda, our relationship with the government. And unfortunately, we see that it's the politicians are trying to take advantage relationship, because there has been like the Archbishop is tend to siding with the Edgar Lungu group, and then which is unfortunate because
I'm
the Catholic
recording.
Church is not talking of a church that has got over 6 million members in the country, and it's unfortunate. Much as what the was not professional, because a church is a public place which can be accessed at any time, and it is unfortunate that the police but of course we saw that quickly left the venue, and group managed to also hold their own requiem mass, as well as the state uh, memorial service in honor of the late president. For me, it's really unfortunate that a man that had saved this nation before being president should be a political football. And I think all this was avoided by the Edgar Lungu group, because could have done, especially that President Edgar Lungu is a former president. He's not just an ordinary person. He take a step, because he too has hosted such memorial events for previous head of state, and this event held at the Cathedral of the Child Jesus. President Mwanawasa was a Baptist, but his memorial at the Cathedral of the
It keeps
Holy Cross.
breaking.
So for me, I find it very
His audio.
President Lungu and his
I don't know what's up with your audio, William, but it keeps breaking. I don't know if it's just me, but I don't know what's wrong with your audio, William, but it keeps breaking. I don't know if it's just me, but it really does keep breaking every couple of seconds when you speak.
I think it's due to load shedding in my ear, but I think that is my submission thus far.
You know,
Thank you very much.
there's two sides to this, and I do agree to a very large extent. The one thing, and I was actually talking about this earlier this evening with a colleague of mine, that given the present political landscape and what's going on in the country politically, I am not surprised that former President Edgar Lungu was not very keen to be a part of the exercise today. Why? Because it's a state function, and he's actively seeking to be president of this country. So there is a lot of political attachment on his side, and his political ego is probably also at play, and knowing that he's a former head of state who still wants to be president, he probably isn't a huge fan of state functions. He probably doesn't like going to these state functions where his opponent is the boss and all those things. And it was a perfect opportunity for him to find a reason not to go there. And and they used this moment to strike. What seems to be where the government seems to have been caught napping, and where there's basically no justification for what happened, was them sending police officers to the cathedral of Child Jesus. I mean, there's absolutely no reason for any church event to for that to happen. Like that, there was no justification for that to happen, and that's the reason why it was the police was later withdrawn. Because why were they there? If for me, from the side of government, I think they fail prey to all of this, because the family, like you rightly put it, the former first lady was a part of the event. She was a part of the state function. Who else did the government want to be a part of the state function? Who else did they want, to be a part of the state function? Because this was much as it was a state event, it was also a family event, because there's a family involved in this bereavement or celebration of life. So the moment the government had the family's support, and if you ask me, William, the tonation from the family has consistently been that they don't have a problem with this. Former Permanent Secretary Kasolo also held the considered view that this was a statesman. And that's something you can never change. He will forever be a former president of this country. But being caught in this political fray is very unfortunate. And I think that government fell into this trap by sending that huge number of police officers there. They should have never sent it. I think that this is one of those times where government should have said, you know what, let them do whatever they want to do. But you've got the state function this side with the family, and this is what's going to matter. This is what mattered, because the other Requiem Mass was not really the highlight of the day. What became the highlight of the day? The huge police presence that was there. And now the Archdiocese of Lusaka issues this very strong statement suggesting that the government has gone rogue, literally using those words, that the government has gone rogue. This government has gone rogue. So politicizing, this is the height of politics in this country. And we're seeing exactly what the consequences of these kinds of politics are, and it's rather unfortunate. I have to say that it's rather unfortunate. I saw your hand was up, William, and you wanted to say something.
Well, I've noticed the daughter, she's in the space. I know she doesn't like attention issues, but I don't know if she can also just also give a position on this issue. That is, if she's interested. I've noticed Stella is also in this space. Stella Sata.
Well, I don't usually like to put people on the spot like that. And if she would like to speak, she can request to speak. And I don't usually like to put people on the spot when they join on the space, because for the most part, people don't actually like to be put on the spot in such situations. So that's why I didn't. Speak about.
It's okay. Okay, I think just my last submission. Politics, it's really unfortunate, and I think for governments, they're falling into the traps that have been set up by the Kalungu. There was talk, particularly yesterday, if you're online, particularly on Facebook, the members, the PF page groups were telling people to say, let us go to the cathedral of the church, not go to let us go rather to the cathedral of the church, and let us, because, and all that they were doing, everybody knows when they do that, it's just like to kind of that's what they wanted. So for them, even when they were on social media, they were telling people, let us go to Pop Square, let us shun the one that will be organized by the government. And for them, what happened, the president That is exactly what they wanted, so that they are able to gain some. We see that government doesn't tend to read such moves that the Edgar Lungu group is making to frustrate them. Because at the end of the day, the big issue, as you've said, is that the police prevented people. And that is the whole issue that will come about which group, which that people, the main issue that will come out of this memorial service, that prevented people that wanted to hold the reclaim mass of the former head of state. So for me, I think government must began to not approach these issues with emotions, because they seem to be falling into the traps that the Edgar Lungu group is set, because they were rampant on social media and they knew. Even they knew. In fact, it was their wish and desire to find the police there, and the police were there. And now, at the end of the day, people now tend to blame government. So for me, I think the handlers should be very kind of cautious, particularly the IG. I think people have talked to the IG and avoid.
William's network strikes again, but Stella requested for the mic. Hi, Stella. It's been over a year, the last time that we had some kind of communication, but it's good to see that you're okay. And congratulations on your recent achievement. And I read your thread today. I read your thread today. You were remembering your dad. Very interesting. Before you say anything, how much money was it? The one that you put. You put the one that
No,
was in
Dingindaba,
pounds.
we're not doing that.
The one that was in pounds.
It was enough.
It was enough for the
Yeah.
masters. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just funny when you're scrolling and you this, but interesting discussion. I think I'm going to approach this empathy for everyone involved. The first thing that I want to say is that memorial. So we have been organizing, it's not our first rodeo with memorials. Family, every time that we're organizing the memorial, we approach the government because dad was head of state. So we always have our plans as a family that we plan around, where we tell ourselves, if government will not come in, this is what we're going to do. But we always approach the government. 3 months before or some time before, we approach the government and say, what role do you want to play? We also approach the party because we know that as much as he was head of state, president of a political party, and the party also loved him. So as a family, it's our stance. We approach the party, we approach the government. Now, we give priority to what the government says. If the government says we are holding it at the cathedral, or we go to the Anglican cathedral. This is not the first time that we have held the Anglican cathedral. So, being the 10th member, given guidance by the government that we were to hold it at the Anglican. As a family, we stood firm and said we are having it at the Anglican cathedral. Just to give a little bit of background, which is not public information, government came in and said we were going to hold it at the cathedral. We were actually making plans to have, and we had proposed 2 dates, the 28th, which is the actual, or the 2nd. So we were on board saying if government is not coming on board, we're having it, because that was his parish. We were not even thinking I get confused with all these cathedrals. We were not even thinking of the Catholic cathedral. We're thinking St. Ignatius. Now, when government came on board cathedral or the Anglican cathedral, we said this is where we are going. Obviously, even within the family, there are people who feel strongly about the fact that, and they said, why don't we have it at the Catholic cathedral? And our clear. It started from my older brother, Bamulenga. He said, guys, we are going with what government has said. I reiterated the same. Vamayo gave the same guidance to say, you know what, this is our person being honored. He person, so we are going to go with what government has said. Now, with that said, continue to understand that he was also the president of the Patriotic Front, and they have a very strong connection to him. So when they organize for the Catholic Cathedral, we said that is fine. Honor this man in any way that they decide to honor him. But as immediate family, we are going to the Anglican Cathedral, but we're not going to stop anybody from going to the. Now, we also have immediate family members who are very strong, active members of the Patriotic, and they went to the Catholic Cathedral. Nobody has a problem with that. I have my first cousin, Vasilvia Chalikosa. She was at the Catholic Cathedral. We were not going to have in-house fighting as a family over that because she decided the other. For us, it was fine. It was a memorial. He was being honored. I'm not going to speak or anything like that. Like, at the end of the day, he was honored in both places. I think the only thing I want to mention is that government also the former president. So if you have actual program for the Anglican Cathedral, the former president was, his arrival was noted there, his departure was noted there. So where he is an individual who can decide to go anywhere, but I just want to make it clear that the family did together with the government, and the one that we sent out to be printed, former President Edgar Lungu being, part of the Patriotic Front, he was president also beyond the issues that are happening because he's also still, he was part of the program. His arrival was stated, where he decided to go, it doesn't matter. For me, I think I feel I had some time to I watched the and then I took some time to also watch the other one because I'm not in the country. And at the end of the day, my father was honored in whichever way everybody decided. And I think that is, I've had some people send me a message, why didn't we do it at the Catholic one? And this is clear. This man, beyond being a father, beyond being the president of the, on his death and everything after that, we followed the state. That's why his funeral at Heroes Stadium and not in the Catholic Church. We believe that, God will still receive his in peace. All these other things, they don't matter. We are still one family. It doesn't matter if you're Catholic, you're Anglican, you're SDA. As long as you believe in Jesus Christ, we believe in Jesus Christ. And so we put petty things aside when it comes to bigger. Man was not an ordinary man. He was man of the nation. So if the nation says functions are at the Anglican, that is where we go. And that will continue to be our stance, future memorials. So that is my position. And I would like to that as a family, we, even in Vamayo's message, she said, anybody can hold their own memorial. But as a family, we were going to the Anglican one. That doesn't mean that we condemn those who had it at the Catholic Church. It was so beautiful that, the Archbishop also got to hold this memorial for this member of their church, because he was a member of their church. So I'm glad they also got to have that opportunity to have that memorial service. And I'm also glad that we also followed the state. So in the end, I think everybody won today, despite of how it started or this and that. Yeah, that is my position.
That's really profound, Stella, and a very, very level headed way, of looking at it. But I'm also just curious to find out, with all of these things that have happened today, great that he was honored, but by both sides, and by both sides, I am actually referring to the political divide. But with I'm genuinely wondering how it makes the family feel. I mean, I know he was a politician, and politics will forever be a part of his legacy. But how does it make you feel as his daughter, as a family, that such a significant moment, 10 years of remembering his life, and the aftermath is a political undertone, um, and the political undertone has continued into the evening, and I can guarantee you that that's what's going to be taking center stage tomorrow. How does this make you feel?
Um, you have to be a politician or wife or nephew or niece to understand that the politics never go, unfortunately, and just be able to accept it. This is not what we would have wanted, maybe like everybody united together and doing it, and to be able to see that unity and put aside the politics for this one day. That would have been the ideal situation. We said everyone. I've seen memorials where they're from different places, but they all come together, and so that would have been the ideal situation. But unfortunately, we cannot control what people do, and we cannot control how people feel. And like I said, I want to approach this from a place of empathy, and the members of the Patriotic Front feel. So they have their reasons, As a family, we're trying to move on. We're trying not to, carry any disunity. But if the Patriotic Front and the government have very strong issues, I guess it can be hard to put it when one part wants to own the person who passed on, and the other was government. So we are the one who will handle it. So yeah, I unity fusion so that we can fully celebrate this man. Where we are, this is who we are, and what is done is done. It will not bring him back. it will not bring him back. So we just have to figure out how to move on. Discuss it tonight, people will discuss it tomorrow. But you know how it goes, Dingindaba, like people will move on to the next story, and we will continue our healing and moving on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Finally, before I let you go, I found it a very interesting thread that you put together. That you were talking about finances, but I think there's a lot more than just. And I guess you were talking about finances because you're on brand with that. That's your digital thing. But would you share with me, like some of your favorite memories as we're remembering him today, Stella, and and yeah, let's start with some of your favorite memories and some of the things you miss the most about him, and also, okay, we'll get to that. Let me hear just some of your favorite memories. I thought that your thread was really nice.
Yeah. So I think most of the stories with my dad are just some of the conversations we would have. He always made me laugh, like something to say that you would not expect, and you probably be then asking, so what does that mean? Because it would be like a Bemba proverb or something like that. But for me, I think one of the most profound moments and memories I have is when I feel like my dad became like my single parent, because my mom had a stroke, and so it was just my dad while she was in a coma. And I think at that time, return home from Malaysia and just not continue school. But we had a really honest conversation at that time where I think it started with him, cracking a joke, saying, "Oh well, are you a doctor? What are you gonna come do?" At that time, we had a real conversation about life is fragile, and you really have to put on, what happens if things don't go the way that you plan. And he was, I was so used to being, my mom's daughter, and like everything should do for me. But then I had to start growing up because now we had a situation. She was not available, and I had to be strong, and I had to figure out. So when I think of the man that he was, I think person who mixed jokes but with a lot of wisdom and a lot of and to kind of prepare me for where I am today. Type of person who doesn't have a mom, doesn't have a dad, and I'm also a mom, so like trying to figure life out. And I appreciate that sometimes the lessons where I was a little too young to understand, but so as I reflect, there's a lot of money stories because I feel like my dad's, money, but there were, it was, you can't do this because what happens if I'm not there tomorrow? Your mom, she's not in a place where she can do certain things. So it was a lot of those conversations that, and whenever I can remember them, like I'll write them down so I don't forget. Yeah.
That's and do you talk about him with your son? And I can imagine what it's like. Your
Sorry, what
grandfather.
was the question?
Did you hear me? Can you hear me
I
now?
think yeah.
Okay, I was saying, do you talk about him with? Do you talk about him with your son? I can imagine what it must be like to be told that your grandfather was the president.
Yes. Oh, my son is always so curious, but also it's so funny. I see my son a lot in my dad because you're a resident comedian. He's always making other people laugh, always asking questions. And sometimes I want to like just crawl into my chair, but it's so interesting to be able to tell him, your grandfather used to do that. Like I saw a post today about him putting my dad putting his hand up at St. Ignatius to disagree with the preacher. That's something my son does all the time. And because we're in Canada, I'm always like, oh my God, they're going to see the black child doing the wrong thing in church. But yeah, I always have those conversations and just try to tell my son about him and tell him how they're similar and, how they're different. And my son is so proud. He makes his friends Google his grandfather.
I, I would too. I think a lot of people would. But yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for agreeing to William's invite to speak and requesting to speak. It was very nice talking to you. Um, I want Best to speak, but I know Best is a very dangerous man, and I don't know if it's the right mood right now. But Best, how are you this evening? Best Ngoma, how are you today? Do you want to unmute your mic so you can be able to speak? Hello, I can't hear you. He's connecting. All right. I'm just being very cautious because we were trying to be very neutral with this whole thing, and I know that Best is very politically aligned. So I don't, I really don't know what to expect from Best in situations like this. But I think he has the right to speak. So I'm gonna. He's connecting, so his connection is not perfect. But I want to take you a little bit back to. Oh, I want to take you forward. I want to take you a little bit back to the drama in the country because I want you people to listen to this audio. This is Paramount Chief Mpezeni. He was complaining about dams that have not been created in his chiefdom. This space was supposed to end a while back, so My production crew right now is looking at me. They're like, he's about to do another story. They're looking at me and saying, another story. Okay, let me just do this story, guys, and then we'll end the night. I know we will have to we have to dispatch to our different homes, but yeah.
Kamba mumakamba manje kuti vichitike sivichitika achemukalikulwa muti ai madhamu vantu kupima madhamu siowera madhamu nesi vachifutuwa chokako mawera nai ngani yama yai unoona kuti pali pena chichitika vachichoreka kuti monga
mdara sikumamveka vyakamba
pali pechanoonapo nesi vantu kutika pa tiaiteni mpime madhamu pima kuyangana madhamu siyakumbika vantu vakufa voveta vokufa manje mwawera naingani kukamba mumakamba manje kuti muchite simuchite kuma pali pechiri chosanira kuyankheni pali pechiri chosanira kuyankheni pakuti nilavire pali pechizomvuika komwe kungokumva ntiya ngolavira kuti ndava chimozimozi mwana ngatomunamiza kuti ani switi simumpasa nje mailo mama akasule kuti atata vanapora manje palibeshaningala no kambani kumana kulonderani pitamoni mafumu koma kuchita simuchita lonjezo mumapereka lonjezo manje apo lonjezo iyo siningaizele vantu tafwa minisaize palakali kunkhania chiteni promesa zamadhamu chani nokutamba namanje madhamu siyakonzeka so olwapa munuza ni vintu vakuti muza mwana mwana manje lero palibichanika kama
Oh, the audio is bad again. But Paramount Chief Mpezeni was basically complaining, and the audio is actually done. He was complaining about how things are not being done, but promises are being made. Very, very blunt. And if you haven't seen this video, you can go ahead and watch it. It's there on my timeline. And you will hear what he was saying. But Best, I see you're still here. Do you want to request to speak so that we can wrap it up? You're gonna be our last, but if you gotta do it, you gotta do it now. So if you still have something to say, then you can go ahead and request. Then we can hear your thoughts, and then we wrap up the current space this evening. I think Best's network is not great where he is tonight. That should be a lot of people because of the lack of electricity. It's a bit the electricity problem is a bit frustrating. But thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us on the space this evening. We really appreciate you being a part of this conversation, and thanks a lot to everyone that has been a part of this space. I've seen a comment there. I'm trying to read it. Okay. Best says next time. All right. Thank you. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining in. Bye-bye.